All right, we'll get going. Now, Randy, what year would this be you covering the Cyclones?
Off and on, a lot.
I know. Give me, what do you think, though, honestly?
30.
30. So it took 30 years for us to get this team room right, all right, and get really good chairs. So in honor of Randy, we've got a great staff room and great chairs.
Still don't have a quarterback under center. But.
We don't. We'll get that done somewhere down the road, I promise you. All right, but at least we got you a good chair and you're comfy and cozy to ask good questions. All right, fair enough. So hopefully everybody's excited to be back. I know we are. It's been a good summer. Obviously, the last 7 months have been certainly a good start to building this year's football team. And I think obviously a lot of challenges, as there always is, a lot of growth in the last 7 months, and certainly excited to get into now truly the football practice. I think one thing that's great about this time of year from a football standpoint is it's football. And for the next 3 weeks, we get football without school and can continue to build our football team that way. So with that said, I'll certainly open up to you guys for any questions you might have for me.
Matt, in what areas must Brock be improved in order to compensate for the loss of David and Akeem?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think the biggest thing for Brock is us as coaches got to be really smart about making sure we allow Brock to just grow as a football player. And all I mean by that is I think sometimes a young man, especially early in your career as a freshman, has great success like Brock did. And, I think sometimes you're eager to put so much on his shoulders that you can stunt the growth that would happen. I think that's why sometimes you see, a player have a really good year and then goes down a year and then kind of has to build back up. And, I think we're in a situation, we've got a couple young guys. Brock's in that situation. Mike Rose is in that situation. Anthony Johnson's in that situation. That those are guys that got really good playing time. And I think it's easy to, maybe put them out there so much and expect so much of them that it could stunt their growth. And in the reality, all I'd like to see Brock do is grow from a freshman to a sophomore. I think we all saw what he can do when he's playing at his best, no matter who's in the backfield or who's at receiver. I think that's the one great thing about Brock is he spreads the ball where the ball needs to go with great consistency. He also has this unique ability to pull the ball down and run with the football. And so I think as long as Brock continues to evolve and grow and play to his strengths, I think Brock will be ready to have a great year.
Matt, how much are you going to lean on some of the new guys or some of the young guys in that wide receiver room this season?
Yeah, the receiver situation certainly it's going to be really unique. And to even sit here and say who is probably really hard right now. Other than Tariq Milton and Deshaunte Jones, Landon Akers got a taste of it again a year ago. But, I think those two primarily are guys that have shown that in the toughest situations, in the critical moments, they've been able to make plays. Until the rest of that group gets in those moments, and some of that's fostered through fall camp. As I've always said, I really believe a lot of that's when the lights come on and there's 60, 70,000 people sitting in the stands witnessing what's going on. You really don't know what you have. So I think it's a really, as we know, the mix of it is some new guys that joined us, some really talented young guys. And that's where these young guys have really, for the last 7 months, been preparing for these moments that are about to come and be highly evaluated to see who and what and when they're going to be able to step up and make plays for this football team. I think there's a lot of talent there, but again, it's just talent until we get a chance to see it.
How much do the tight ends take the pressure off those guys as they try to figure it out and see who can go make the plays, just so, they've proven that they're getting older, they can go do things?
Sure. I think that's another area where you're fortunate to have depth and you're fortunate to have experience. You talk about Chase Allen, and Chase couldn't have got off to a better start last year playing the tight end position. Played really good football until he got hurt late in the Oklahoma game. And, the toughness of Chase to come back and help our team late in the season, I think showed who he is. And then obviously Charlie then got his opportunity to get in and get a bulk of playing time and had some big moments. again, what's the next step for them? Can they be the X factor? Can they be consistent in those critical moments? It's going to be really fun to watch that. I thought those guys had great springs. I think the other guy that you can't not talk about in that room is Dylan Sainer. And Dylan has a very similar, I think, growth pattern to what Marcel Spears had. Dylan started on all 4 special teams, easily could have been our special teams captain a year, or MVP a year ago, and was outstanding there. And I think what that's done for us is said, man, we really trust this guy. How do we enhance him, and how does he enhance our team? And, probably midway through the spring, he probably was the guy that was the catalyst of what we were doing at times offensively. So I think it's a really unique group. I think that group kind of, again, plays a lot of different roles when you're a tight end. That's what's great about the tight end position. You're a receiver, you're a blocker, you create gaps in the run game, but you also can create mismatches in the passing game. And that's not always saying that you're an attached tight end doing that. It's a position that you play, but those guys can move around just like you've seen us move Butler around and Lazard around throughout their careers as well.
Your last 3 years at Toledo, 13 through 15, you had 2 running backs with 700-plus yards. Obviously, David was kind of the workhorse the last few years, but with him gone, do you think you could go that route where maybe there's a couple guys splitting a lot of yardage?
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing that's really unique. Again, much like we're talking to the receiver room, the running back room is a room that is certainly talented, and everybody has very unique traits and talents. And, if you do go back to our Toledo days, there was guys rotating every other series, and they were darn good running backs. And, there was a time where Kareem Hunt, David Fluellen, those guys were in the same backfield at the same time, and that was all really positive. And I think we're at least finally at that place where there's highly talented, highly competitive guys in that room. And yes, David was the mainstay, and we all know that because we saw that. But we also were able to persevere at times, and guys got to showcase a little bit of their talent when David wasn't in some really critical moments for this team. So I think this fall camp's going to be really, it'll unveil who is that guy. And just like I said, the wide receivers, it's 3rd and 6, where's the ball going? Who is that? It's 3rd and 1, it's 4th and 1, who's getting the football? I think that's the question that I'm kind of anxious to see who those guys are, and, it's a great.
Matt, along those lines, trying to replicate everything that David did would probably be unwise to try to push it into one person right now. Do you anticipate kind of a committee approach maybe early in the season, and then also with Hall and Brock? I mean, what kind of opportunity do you expect to give them this month to see if they can make it to the field later in August?
Being gone, is that just Sainer's role, or is that something you need to mess around with in fall camp to figure out who fills that gap?
Yeah, and I think again, Chris, that's a little bit of, as I've always said this. What's our style? Well, our style is players, formations, plays. And Sam brought a unique skill set that allowed him to be, an asset to our offense to be effective and to create matchups to be successful. And so, does a guy like Dylan have some of those qualities? He does. does he also have a lot of other unique qualities? Boy, he really does. And so I think what you have to do is adapt your offense around the skill sets of your really talented players. And Dylan is a guy that's certainly really talented. And Dylan's also a guy that I think can help us create matchups in our offense. And how we use him, how he kind of unveils his role, I think we'll always continue to tinker with that. And certainly through fall camp, try to get a really good idea. But, you know, like you said, Sam was a great asset to our offense. Does Dylan have some of those roles? He certainly does. And so do some other guys, I think, in our offensive scheme. But I think what Dylan's got is he brings some other uniqueness too. Well, I think, you know, and I've said this too before, we are a developmental football program, and it's going to take every player in our roster for us to become the best version of us. And, you know, I told you last year, you know, we've totally revamped how we practice, how we play, how we go about the season. You know, I think you have to have a mindset almost of, man, I've got a varsity team and I've got a JV team. And, you know, we got to prepare the varsity team just like we got to prepare the JV team. And, you know, when that JV team, those guys start to showcase that they're doing really good things, it gives them a little bit of a nugget to say, man, I might get a chance to help the varsity team be successful. And I think if we all played high school football, we can go back and understand what I'm talking about in that role. So, you know, I think it was extremely beneficial to us a year ago. You know, you're talking Brock Purdy was, for the first 4 weeks, was playing the JV games on Wednesday night here. And, you know, he was in the developmental role and then obviously helped us. And Anthony Johnson was doing the same thing and earned those value and trust. And then you talk about guys like Will McDonald, who got 4 games and really showcased his skill and his ability to at least make a difference on our team. And Paul Vermacher was the same way. Zach Peterson was the same way. So, you know, I think that role is certainly greatly beneficial, you know, especially with the length of college football seasons today and the amount of games that are out there. But something that we really worked, and I do think it was an advantage for us a year ago, and we'll continue to work to find ways to make it an advantage for us. Yeah. Yeah, you know, I sometimes they say the Baileys. I don't know if that's an advantage or not. You know, it just depends who you are and what you're watching. You know, I always say this about Jaquan. Jaquan, I went back a year after we recruited Josh and Jaquan, and, you know, their coach said, man, have you seen their mom? I said, no, I haven't seen him, or I haven't seen her. And so she came up to the school. As she came up to the school, he's like, yeah, she looks like 20 years younger. And she did. She looked 20 years younger, and now I've got gray hair and look 20 years older. But so I don't know if it's a positive or negative, but I think what you do get from it, I think you guys know what kind of culture we've worked really hard here to create. The kind of trust and relationship. This is not you know, it's not a transactional program. It's very transformational. And I think when you bring in that strong bond and that love and care that those guys have for each other, I do think at times it resonates through this program. And obviously having the Kolars and you know, having DeShante and Keontae and the Baileys, and you know, you even go to Coach Haycock and his son being here and being a student assistant on our staff. And I just think those things certainly resonate in terms of it's great to have them, it's great to have great people, and all those people are great people. So, yes, I think it's a positive.
I don't think you can find him by position.
Well, I would say Ray Lima, to be really honest with you. Unfortunately, our staff gets a lot of credit why this program's turned. He's the entire reason the culture of this football program's turned. Who he is, what he stands for, you won't know because you can interview him and he won't tell you. But I can tell you this, he's the reason this football program and the culture of this program's turned. He's a guy that I think has made me a better person. I think he taught me the right way to lead. I think his actions and servant leadership amongst our locker room has been the absolute reason why we are who we are. And, you know, I think in a lot of ways you see that in terms of exactly what you just said. statistically, it's not going to jump off the screen as, boy, Ray Lima is this, or this. But on 4th and 1, 3rd and 1, in the most critical moments in the biggest games that we played here, Ray Lima has been outstanding. And, I think he's just there's only, I think there's a couple people that really impact you in your lives, and, there's reasons why things happen. He's been a huge reason why Iowa State football is where it is.
Can you go beyond that, what you alluded to earlier? I mean, how does he present himself, and how do you describe?
Well, I think humility is the first word that comes to the table. Again, I think you guys, I'll say this, and you guys will go, you interview Ray, and Ray won't tell you anything. And so I know Ray, and you guys that know Ray, that's how it's going to be. His humility, his character, I think just his ability to serve others is really, really powerful. And I think that's really hard to find in our society today. And, I think Ray is defining of that. I think who his family is, what culture he comes from. He's had a great impact not only on the players in this place, but he's had a great impact on the coaches as well.
Matt, you talked on Mike Rose a little bit earlier. Just what's the potential for growth you see in him in his second year in this defense?
Obviously Mike had a lot of success a year ago, and I think very similar to Brock. Like, Mike is a guy that there's a lot of responsibility on his plate as the Mike linebacker. I think that's the thing that's interesting about the parallels of those two. They've got to be the great communicators. There's a lot on their plate. And I just think continuing to grow, see the game, feel the game, understand different situations, understand the length of a college football season. I think all those things are first that it's hard to quantify that, or hard to probably put that into great detail. But I think the reality of it is that's a real issue. That's a real challenge. And I just think going through that and preparing now for what's coming, seeing yourself on videotape, make mistakes, and then being able to correct those mistakes, feeling what it's like to be in those situations, and then being able to correct some of those mistakes that maybe you made a year ago. Michael's very intelligent, and he's a young man that works really hard at his craft. And so I just see him taking that next step as a football player in general at the collegiate level is what's really big for Mike. But I think he's a guy that certainly has got the ability to continue to grow, and it's going to be fun to watch it.
Matt, given what you said about Ray, how critical is Jamal taking that next step after the accelerated progress he showed from the Liberty Bowl into last season to kind of be in the keystone, since you kind of know what you got from Ray and Jaquan?
Yeah. That's a great question. Jamal is Ray just being the starter on there sometimes overshadows how critical Jamal Johnson has been to the success of our football program. And it's really probably unfair in a lot of ways, because as we've moved from in and out of a 4-down to a 3-down front, and 3-down to a 4-down front, the guy that kind of gets a little bit masked of how critical to the success of our program is Jamal. And, Jamal, you're right, Jamal took that Liberty Bowl game, and, in some critical moments again last year, Jamal Johnson's the guy that had the opportunity to stand up and play. And I think what's really unique is that entire defensive line room. Now it's not about who gets the credit. It's about, preparing and challenging themselves and challenging each other to be prepared for the moment. And Jamal's done that. And you go back to Jamal's situation of, a great example we all know is the West Virginia game. Ray can't play in the game. Jamal steps in, is outstanding. Isaiah Lee gets a little bit of a playing time in that game, is outstanding. And so I think that's where we hope we're getting our program. You're going to have great players. Great players are going to leave, but the great players are teaching the young players what it's like to work hard, be prepared for the moment, and understand what their accountability is. And I think that's what's happened with Ray and Jamal, and it's been really fun to watch.
Kind of a two-parter here, but is Easton Dean spending time at tight end, or did he move there? And then two, is there any other position changes or things that you want to do maybe in fall camp to find guys in the right spot?
Yeah, the Easton piece is we're, continuing to just tinker. I think Easton is a big athlete, and to say we're wholesale changing Easton Dean from tight end to quarterback would be wrong. To say that we're continuing to, as me and I will always do is how do we strengthen our roster to be the best roster it possibly can be. That's really important, and it's something that I think we'll always look at, and we certainly even through fall camp at times we've done those things because we all know it's not about those guys that are sitting at the starting point. It's those guys that are in your 2 deep and your 3 deep that really define the success of your football team. And so giving our roster and strengthening our roster to be the best it can be something that's really important to me. We'll always continue to look at that.
Is there anything interesting you can shed light on what maybe you and Coach Manning have done behind the scenes, film room, and that sort of thing since he's been back to try to evolve the offense with 3 tight ends like you did with the Colts, or using running backs in different ways?
Yeah, I think the nice thing for Tom is Tom went out and grew, and I think that growth that he was able to obtain over the last year in Indianapolis, I think really just in terms of bringing some clarity to either what we've done in the past, how we've done things in the past, or how we can be better in the future. I've got a lot of trust in Tom, and I think it's been really fun to just have him back and continue to align ourselves where we want to go. I think that the tight end piece of it, if you go back to even to Toledo, our last 2 years, you're talking about playing, 70% of the snaps in 2 tight ends, and so it's not foreign to us. I think it's something that we've really done a great job of getting back to that level where we can have some multiplicity to who we want to be offensively. And it's certainly great to have Tom back, a guy that, sat in some creative ways. You'll watch that team have great success with their personnel, and at times their personnel was 11, 12, 13, very multiple, as kind of we are multiple too. So, I think just a lot of our time has been organization and here's maybe some tweaks that we had there that we can add to our offense to make us the best offense we can be.
Matt, you've gone from a position of being kind of overlooked as a program to now being among the Big 12 favorites. What kind of adversity is there with having that kind of success, especially at a program that hasn't had a lot of success? And how do you coach that? What do you talk about as far as you're considered among the better teams in the country?
Well, I think again, when you build a program, I think you either build a program to win as fast as you can, and you build it from the outside in, or you really work hard to build a program inside out. And I think when you build a program inside out, you have real life discussions of what this process to get where we want to go is going to feel like. And, I think a little bit of this we were able to prepare a year ago, where maybe there was probably more internal expectations of, not so much internal in terms of this room, but the outside wall of, maybe these guys can be good. And then the challenge of a little bit of failure. We didn't get off to a great start, and the fact of the matter of it is we didn't allow failure to define us. We talked through it and it allowed us to really grow. And so now you get to the point of, okay, now there's maybe more expectations. And then again, I think it's the period where I think of 100 people, they can handle adversity, but it's the one great team or the one great person that has the ability to handle positivity. And I think that's something that we had to learn a long time ago here, because as soon as we moved the needle, you felt like it was this wave of optimism that was going on, and you almost had to temper it, going even back to year one. And so I think educating our guys from the inside out, there is no greater expectation that really anybody in this room has or anybody outside of our walls have than what that locker room, our coaching staff have for ourselves. But we've had that expectation from the first day I walked into these doors. And we just knew it was going to be a process to get where we wanted to go. So, I jokingly said if we listened to the outside world the last 3 years, we would have crumbled and let the outside world tell us what we could or couldn't do. This program would have failed greatly. So, I think we understand that. We're really fortunate. We've got really good senior leaders. Some of those guys have been through what it feels like to not be a good football program and not feel like we're going into the season to have the opportunity to have success. And they've really worked hard to earn it from the ground up. Nothing's been given to them. And so that's how I would answer that. I know it's lengthy, but that's really honest, and that's kind of where we're at right now as a football program.
Excuse me, gotta get this away from me a little. You couldn't have a much more veteran offensive line based on seniors, games started, et cetera. Where are these guys now?
Well, I think we'll know August 31st, or at least have a better idea, and I don't mean that to be smug. I think the reality of it is there is great snaps coming back. A lot of guys have played a lot of games. I do think there's no shortcut to building an offensive line. If you look at the first offensive line that played here, year one and year two, we were trying to bridge it together. We were piece it together. And I think until really last year was the first time we felt like we kind of got a foothold of saying, man, our building blocks are in place. And I think that part has felt really good. And, at Iowa State, you're not going to go just snap your fingers and have a great offensive line. Offensive line play is a learned skill. It's a craft. And you got to work in the weight room. You got to work on how you eat. You got to work on how you play. And it's got to be five guys communicating as one to be successful. Coaching that position, being a part of that position so much in my life that, it's you're not snapping your fingers to get there. And so now we finally get to the point where there is some guys that have played together. There is betterness, cohesiveness. There's actually a plan and understanding that this program and this team will go as we grow and develop. And I think that's been fun to watch that group. I do think one of the huge assets of Coach Manning leaving was Coach Myers taking over. And, I think one of the things that's allowed our team to really grow and what allowed that group to really take a huge step forward was, to be honest with you, was to have Jeff kind of manning the ship and not having to be the offensive coordinator a little bit. And I say that because that's a Coach Campbell probably mistake in my mind, where I put a lot on Tom's plate early on. And the reality is Jeff has stepped in and been incredible, from where we're recruiting now and how we're recruiting to the development and growth. It's been really fun. And now you got a guy like Tom back who's got so much knowledge and certainly has went out and perfected his craft in a lot of ways. I think it's really fun to watch that whole room continue to grow and certainly, work to become the best it possibly can be. So, we know that's an area of continued growth, and it's an area that we understand, because if you look at our past, we've been outstanding in terms of offensive line play and what it's looked like. Have we been that way here? Not yet, but it's one of those areas I think we're a lot closer to where we want to be today.
Coach, you talked about earlier the wide receivers. There might be some uncertainty of who's going to get that ball in those key situations. How important is it to have Deshaunte return, and what impact do you think he's going to have on the young group that's in that room?
Well, yeah, that's a great point. Number one, Deshaunte, a senior that's played a lot of football. I think almost 110, 108, somewhere in that, catches in his career. And Deshaunte's a guy that's made really big plays in really big moments for Iowa State from day one that he stepped foot on our campus. You go back to Deshaunte's past, and you're talking about a big-time quarterback in a big-time high school football program at Cincinnati Coleraine and playing in huge moments. So I don't think the stage has ever been too big for Deshaunte. And Deshaunte's also been the guy that's been counted on to be the leader. He was the quarterback in his senior high school football team. And so one of the areas that I am really confident in is what I've watched over the last 7 months is Deshaunte taking a leadership role in that wide receiver room. And I think it's huge to have somebody in that room that here's what's coming. Here's what the expectations are from Coach Campbell, from our coaching staff, in every step of the way, not only telling them, but showing them. And that's what I love about Deshaunte, is he is a doer, not a talker, and he's done a great job of it so far. So I think it's huge for us.
You've established your defense as one of the Big 12's best defenses. What do you have to do to take a next step?
Yeah, I think we're always just continuing to work and grow. I think that's the thing about what we are defensively, that, I think it's constantly evolving and at times having to change. And, I think that's something that you've seen us do. Credit so much to our defensive coaching staff and Coach Haycock. And, I think it's one of those things where if you just say we're going to stay the same in terms of how we do what we do, then I think that's where you put yourself in some tough situations. So, the neat thing for us is we do have some new personnel. Evaluating that personnel, how does that personnel fit same thoughts on offense as we do on defense. Who are your players? What formations do you get in? And obviously, what plays do you call or run? And, I think for us, what we've done a great job of, the last year and a half is at least find out what our players can do and put them in a position to do. And, I think as long as we continue doing those things, we'll continue to be able to be a good football team.
All right. Coach Lynn Harrington, Stay Alive in Power 5. Good seeing you again.
Good seeing you.
Your defense has been, hands down, one of the best in the Big 12 the past couple of seasons. With the 4 new coaches in the league, do you see the league trending towards playing more defense instead of wide open offenses? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, again, that's a really good question too. I think that we'll have to see how those guys and what those guys do in terms of building their football team. I think history would say, right, that you're seeing a team that those are coaches that their teams, and the reason they've had success is because they're a complete program. They play great in special teams, they play great on offense, they play great on defense, and it's why they've all had success where they've been. So will it change dramatically, in terms of offensive personnel or how they do what they do? I don't know. But I think when you talk about our team, yes, we play great defense, but what we really are great at is we play great complementary football, right? We're not, we're really not great at anything. We're great complementing each other and giving ourselves the best chance to be successful. And I think that's where our success has come. And I think these coaches that are coming into the league certainly have the ability to do that and have shown that. So I think great challenges, and I think it'll really continue to better where this league continues to go.
How do you guys feel about where you are at cornerback?
Well, again, I think that's where, playing some of those guys a year ago and those guys getting really good experience will have helped us at least have some confidence of, who's going out there and guys that have been in big-time moments and forced to make big-time plays. Datrone Young was playing outstanding last year until he got hurt at Kansas. Anthony Johnson was in some of the biggest moments we've had and played really good football. And, and to be honest with you, Michi Walker is a guy that, has played sparingly but in really big roles and has earned it. And so, I think at least at the top, you're confident in knowing what the reaction of those guys will be and watching their preparation. Then I think I think it's a wide open race in terms of who else is playing. What does that look like? And I think that's going to be really fun to watch too. There's some talented guys, Tavon Kyle, Keontae Jones, Javion Morton. There's some really talented young freshmen. I think they've been maybe one of the more impressive groups that have been here. DJ Miller, Kamani King. And so how and who does that competition look like as this camp really gets into the heat of it? And again, who can consistently show up? And so I think we're at least confident that there's good bodies. Would I say we're sitting here today saying we're confident in who those guys are going to be or what that 2D is going to look like? No, and I think it's going to be really fun to watch the competition in that group grow.
What has been your overall impression of the newcomers through spring and summer, and have there been any guys that have stood out in particular heading into fall?
Yeah, we had 4 guys join us in January, and so that was really big. Blake Peterson did a great job for us in the spring. Had a really good, I think, spring practice. I think Blake brings some pass rush ability. As a guy that's got some dynamic tendencies to what he does. So I think we're really excited about him. Brees Hull, obviously running back, got some really good reps and experience through the spring. He's big. He's different than what we've played at the tailback position. Easton Dean, again, I think just the athleticism jumps off the plate. Big, long, athletic, things that obviously have been really fun to watch from his standpoint. And then Jared Hufford, a young guy that really had a great spring. And I said from my end, shockingly, the offensive line, those guys really struggle. He's a guy that physically came in, and by the end of spring practice was really impressive. And so I think that's unusual to have 4 guys that really jump off the screen after just being here for so long. But those guys did. And then I think this other group, it's a really talented group, but until we even get into playing the sport of football, you're guessing on things that obviously really don't matter. But I do think this group is really so much impressive in terms of who they are, what they are, and how they come in to go to work. and I think they certainly have bettered our football program immensely. So we at least look the part, and that part's positive.
What traits does Tom have that eventually will allow him to be a head college football coach at a big-time school?
Yeah, I think Tom has got I think the biggest thing that Tom has is he understands why he's doing what he's doing. And, I think Tom's got great humility. He's got great character. Tom also is really passionate about young people. And to be honest with you, like, all the other stuff is stuff. But if you know who you are, you're not trying to be somebody else, and you can stay really loyal to those values, then I really think you can have great success in this profession, no matter what you choose to do or what route you choose to go. And I think for Tom, that's something that has always made him a really good coach, whether it was the offensive line coach, whether it's the offensive coordinator, whether it's going into Indianapolis and they rave about him because of who he is, not what he is. And I think the same thing, is what will eventually, if he ever chooses to go down that route, do a great job of that.
You mentioned it a little bit in Dallas, but with punter, obviously Joe is on the roster. I think you guys got a transfer too. What are you looking for maybe in a guy to emerge there? And then kind of in the same vein with place kicker, Connor's back, but a kickoff man too. Where do things maybe stand as far as that goes and going into camp?
Yeah, we talked a little bit, Joe Rivera, we're really excited about. You never want to lose a really good player, and sometimes those things happen. In Corey's situation, literally, it happened, and one of the things I love about Corey is he'll be the best specialist coach you could find out there, because he's going to do a great job of helping our guys out until he can get himself back. But where we're fortunate is Joe Rivera again, and I know I said this in Dallas, that you never want to be in a situation where we got ourselves into a really dicey football game, our last game of the season, and the first punt snap got dropped, and it was like, man, let's go with Joe. He was a guy that really felt like could give us some confidence, and he had earned the confidence and trust of his coaches and teammates. And Joe went in, and I said this after the game, was the MVP of that football game. And I think just knowing that Joe was our holder a year ago, he's got a great sense of trust by his coaches, by his teammates. His ability is outstanding. And I think just what you want to see from that is, like any other position on our team, consistency. And I think that starts with us developing a scheme for whoever that punter may be. But if it is Joe or Brian or whoever it may be, us doing a great job of making sure that scheme matches their skill set and ability to allow them to be consistent. Kickoff, certainly another area. Peyton Paddock went into that Drake game as well. Kicked off, was outstanding in the game. Peyton was competing the whole time a year ago, and I think all of us feel really confident about him. Will there be competition in fall camp? Yes. Do we want to see consistency? We will, but really excited about those guys. And then obviously I think with Connor Sally coming back and the confidence that he brings, plus Braden Arverson, who has great talent, and where does he grow from his freshman year to his redshirt freshman year? And Braden's got that unique ability to be a kickoff guy or be a place kicker, or certainly have the ability to punt at times too. So, it'll be really fun. I think there's some great competition there, and enough competition that nobody can probably feel settle and rest on their laurels, and enough competition that everyone's going to have to demand their best every day, which is huge.
You've mentioned players, formations, plays. Flipping over to the defensive side, does the depth you have on the D-line, some of those guys maybe would start, the backups would start at some other schools. Does that allow you to situation look at four-man fronts, and what does the depth in the front six maybe allow you to do creatively? Yeah,
no, I think, even if you go back and really study us a year ago, there were times where we got into a four-man front. And, I think that's where we feel comfortable. That's still comfort because that's been our foundation, and so I think certainly gives you the flexibility and the ability to get to a four-man front and play a four-man front when needed. Like I said, I think as we continue to evolve and grow, it's great to have that tool in your pocket to be multiple when you need that multiplicity. And I think we'll know a little bit more about ourselves after fall camp of what are our strengths. How much of that is real and how much of that is not real. So, certainly a tool for us that we can always go to, and it's helped us even over the last year and a half.
All right, Coach, thanks.
Thank you.